You're through to the police. What's the location of your emergency?
I was stabbed.
Right, when's
Neighbour's
that?
husband and the mother.
Right, where are you at the moment?
Dragon Rise.
Alright, okay. And are you safe at the moment?
Yes.
Right, have you got any injuries? Whereabouts have you been stabbed?
No, not me, the neighbours. They've both been stabbed.
Right, the neighbour's been stabbed by who?
Quarter to 10 on the evening of the 21st of November 2021, the police received a call from an address in Dragon Rise in Norton Fitzwarren, where the occupant of that address had told us that he stabbed two of his neighbours, Jennifer and Stephen Chappell. Put your hands up. When you look at the circumstances around this case, is it unusual? Of course it's unusual. Norton Fitzwarren is a respectable place. We don't expect this sort of offences to take place. We don't often get double murders. And for one person to stab two victims in quick succession is not an easy task.
Jennifer Chappell didn't even have time to get up off the sofa. When the police found her, she was slumped forward in front of the sofa where she'd kind of fallen as she was dying.
Why did it happen? There was no obvious motive for this offence. This is somebody in their own living room on a Sunday night, watching TV, sat like every other husband and wife around the country, brutally murdered within their own house.
Jennifer was my best friend in the whole world. I moved to Glastonbury and started at the local primary school, and she took me right under her wing. Jennifer commanded a room. She would walk in and instantly everyone would be like, wow. She oozed charisma. Jen embodied everything that Glastonbury stands for, crystals and witches and birds and kind of like this witchy Glastonbury essence. She used to take me onto the local music scene, which was all predominantly metal, and it was a bit of a trademark for us as friends to go for guys in bands. It was a bit of a kind of, I'm with a guy in a band. It's like, of course you are.
It's on the colourful local music scene that Jennifer meets the man who will change her life.
I knew a guy had come onto the scene that had caught her attention, and that guy was Stephen. Stephen was a teacher, but he was playing music as well in a successful band that were really well known in the area. To hear of Jennifer and Stephen, it wasn't a surprise because of who Jennifer was and who Stephen was.
From the moment 29-year-old Stephen and 26-year-old Jennifer get together, they are inseparable.
I think as soon as everybody met him, they knew he's the one. There was so much love between them. They were just the perfect match.
They were soulmates. He was very, very, very dry, very sarcastic, confident, outgoing. He loved music, absolutely loved music.
Jennifer had sent me a message saying, meet your new niece or nephew, and I will never forget the joy I felt seeing the ultrasound photos, going, oh my God, I'm going to have a nephew or a niece. They were so over the moon, because I think Jennifer always wanted children.
With one child and another on the way, the couple begin to squirrel away money to buy a home of their own.
Norton Fitzwarren's quite a small place, quite quiet. Only about 3,000 people live there, so more of a suburb of Taunton, really. We've got some new build estates around the edges.
Jennifer and Stephen's house hunting takes them to what appears to be the perfect location.
Dragon Rise is just off the main road through Norton Fitzwarren. Everyone had a back garden. There were schools nearby.
I think they were just happy that they had a place And I think that's where they thought they'd settle down and stay forever.
Jennifer says it was a really lovely environment to bring children up in. Really great sense of community, amazing neighbours. Jennifer just moved in and slotted right in with everyone.
The Reeves just seemed like a normal family, like anybody else on that same estate.
Soon after moving in, the Chapels meet their next-door neighbours, Kaylee Reeves and her truck driver husband, Colin.
Colin Reeves was working for a transport company delivering extendable platforms around the country. He has 2 young daughters that were at the same local primary school, and Kaylee, his wife, was a mum.
The Reeveses had 2 daughters and the Chapels had 2 sons. They had that in common. They both had kids and they used to bump into each other on the school van.
I think quite early on they got on quite well, like they were friendly.
Colin Reeves was a bit quieter, maybe not as chatty as Kaylee. I don't think they were uneasy about him. I think they just thought he was not a very extroverted person. One evening, Stephen was manoeuvring into his parking space and he bumped Colin Reeves's car and he caused quite a bit of damage.
Stephen was really embarrassed. He was genuinely a bit sort of, oh God, what have I done? And was very aware that everyone's children would be asleep. So he left it to Jennifer. Jennifer sent a message, that we're really sorry. How do we rectify this?
It cost a couple of £1,000 to get it fixed.
While Stephen and Jennifer consider the matter closed, next door the Reeves aren't quite so happy with the way it was handled.
It does seem, from our records from that point, the relationship between the 2 families deteriorated somewhat.
If an issue, even if it seems quite minor at the time, isn't resolved, then there's a problem, because the feelings of resentment can fester over time. Nobody could have predicted that this innocent act of accidentally bashing into your neighbour's car could have set off a chain of events that eventually led to such a tragic and deadly outcome.
Jennifer was determined to get her driver's licence, and she did. She absolutely smashed it out the park, and Steve bought her a car, a little blue Citroen. She was so excited to have her car.
By day, Jennifer's car is parked at the garden centre cafe where she worked. By night, she has to find somewhere to park it on the cramped estate.
Because there was only one parking space outside her house, she used to park her car on the road, and this made it slightly more difficult for Colin Reeves to reverse out of his parking space or reverse into it.
Jennifer had come back from work and parked her car just in front of the communal area, and Colin came out.
You can't reverse in here when the car's here all the time. I thought about that. You've got one parking space. Well,
Jennifer wasn't aggressive in her reply. It was just, yes, you can, like I can, this is a free space. And it was niggly rather than aggressive. He'd obviously been stewing on it a little. He was automatically aggressive, which automatically made Jennifer a bit sort of on the back foot.
It felt like he was coming out just to try and maybe scare her, maybe try and show that he's got some sort of power, but I'm sure Colin probably didn't like her because she would happily actually argue back.
Colin Reeves couldn't understand why Jennifer Chapel would get another car when she didn't have the space for it, and Jennifer couldn't understand why he couldn't just get over it. I think they just butted heads, really. Colin Reeves came up with the idea of widening the parking space.
He'd laid some bricks in the communal area to widen his driveway, and at the top of that communal area was where cars would park. So it kind of made it so no one could park there, which made Jennifer and Stephen's life difficult when they now had 2 cars.
They asked him, why he had done it, and he said that by widening his space, this had reduced the stress that he and Kaylee were going through as a result of the parking space issue.
The way that Reeves has dealt with this whole situation suggests that he's not a man that has the psychological skills to handle it in a more healthy and calmer manner, but instead somebody who's probably quite impulsive. He's the kind of person that will not express his emotions in a healthy manner, but rather bottle them up.
At this point, Jennifer was holding quite a lot of anger towards the Reeves, more from feeling like they were being a little petty.
And after 3 years, Jennifer and Kaylee's relationship has now also completely deteriorated.
It got to the point where Jennifer and Kaylee didn't want to run into each other on the school run anymore. Friendly neighbourliness had completely broken down.
There was tension between the mothers. Kaylee believed that Jennifer was shooting her looks or talking about her. Jennifer believed the same about Kaylee.
Kaylee would then tell Colin, or Colin would find out about these, and I think that really played on his mind because he really wanted to protect his family and his wife specifically.
Jennifer's on edge, so Stephen's on edge. Kaylee's on edge, so Colin's on edge. Everyone's feeling it. And Colin turns up at her place of work.
Jennifer is working in the cafe at the garden centre when she gets the feeling she's being watched.
Jennifer texted me and she said, Colin's come to my work and he's just sat here staring at me. He's got his arms crossed. He's watching me. He's not interacting with his children. He's just sat there. I believe he was there for well over 2 hours. A long time. To sit in a cafe and just watch someone. Why? It's very, very intimidating and then validating Jennifer's fear of the Reeves.
Jennifer said that he turned his chair to face her. It did seem a bit strange to go to the same place that your neighbour's working and turn your chair to stare at them.
It's possible that it was just a coincidence and Colin was just there with his children, but it really feels like this is done intentionally to be menacing and to be intimidating. And this must have been terrifying for Jennifer.
Colin Reeves joined the army when he was 17 and he passed the commando course, which is extremely difficult and quite gruelling, and he was very proud to have passed that. He went to Afghanistan to Camp Bastion, and while he was there he was also a security guard on the prisoner of war camp where they held the suspected terrorists. So he had quite a varied and probably quite a harrowing time in Afghanistan.
And I believe it's at that point that, for me, the penny dropped that Jennifer was scared of something worse than a dispute, because Jennifer's words to me were, he's a trained killer and he's watching me.
It wasn't just a neighbourly dispute anymore, this had become personal.
The couple find that what had once been a happy home has become a prison.
Jennifer got more and more scared because of Colin's background in the army, and she just felt more scared to go out. And that's not really fair, because you should feel safe in the place you're living.
And next door, the Reeves are in a state of turmoil too.
I think by November 2021, Colin Reeves's mental state had deteriorated quite a bit. It was coming up to Remembrance Sunday, which was always very difficult for him as an army veteran. It was around then that he had a conversation with Kaylee, and he said that he just wasn't feeling himself. He thought that she would be better off without him, and he talked about his job and how depressed and lonely he felt driving the lorry all day. He was in quite a bad place mentally.
It does feel like he's unravelling We know that he's got these mental health problems. And of course, there's this ongoing dispute with the neighbours. And then on top of that, he's got some marital problems. So to me, it feels like the whole world around him is crumbling.
Jennifer Chappell came home to our house one night. She knew that the Reeveses had this camera that overlooked their parking space, and so she made a rude gesture at the camera.
Reeves has taken to watching the monitor of his CCTV camera, and Jennifer's action leaves him enraged.
Ultimately, only Colin Reeves knows why he set up a camera. I know he didn't like cameras, he didn't like feeling like he was on camera. He used to tape over the camera on his phone because maybe he thought people were spying on him. In his job as a lorry driver, there was a camera in his cab that videoed everything he was doing. That was something he really didn't like about his job.
The 11th of November is really important because it's Remembrance Day. And Colin obviously is an ex-soldier. I believe he dealt with his own demons that day.
Colin spends the morning at a remembrance event. Back at home, trouble is brewing.
Jennifer had seen the Reeves children hissing and spitting and trying to hurt her cats. She'd said over a text message, she's letting her kids just terrorise my cats. How is she letting that happen?
Jennifer confronted Kaylee about it and said, your children are kind of spitting at the cats, hissing at them. And I think Kaylee said something along the lines like, that's what children do. They were quite confrontational with each other.
Colin returns to find his wife Kaylee upset and angry. As Jennifer returns home, he suddenly approaches.
When she got out of her car and walked towards her front door, Colin Reeves appeared out of the darkness and accused Jennifer of gobbing off. And she said Kaylee started it and told him to F off. Once Colin came out of the darkness, both of them were firing on all cylinders. Colin Reeves was swearing at her, calling her all sorts of names, calling her fat.
She's the one who started it, so
He's really aggressive. I think Jennifer just wanted to get inside and out of the way of it because she didn't want anything to happen.
She was really scared when she goes back in that house. She calls me. I'm sat on the sofa with another friend who's gone, this is horrible. I think that was the real moment that Jennifer feared for her life.
It was clear that any kind of diplomatic relations between the two families were gone by that stage. It was full-on war between them.
Jennifer and I were exchanging videos on a social media platform, and she voiced her concerns about Colin. Danny, he is a trained killer. He's coming for me. I think that all made us stand up and take notice.
Colin Reeves went to the Christmas lights switch on in Taunton with his mum and his sister and his two daughters. He was surrounded by crowds and he found being in a crowded environment quite difficult after lockdown.
Colin Reeves arrives home shortly before 6 p.m. Next door, Stephen Chappell is marking homework. Jennifer is putting the boys to bed before settling down to watch TV.
It's Sunday, 21st of November 2021 in Dragon Rise. Cold evening, coming on towards Christmas.
3 hours later, the Chappell CCTV camera detects movement.
The CCTV is essentially motion activated. The first thing you see is a figure over the garden fence to the right, which is the direction of Colin Reeves' house. That person then crouches down underneath the windows at the back of the house. Then in the bottom corner, what appears to be a back door opening, and that opens quite quickly after he crouches down. And then very soon after that, you hear a really piercing scream.
The screams are too distressing to broadcast. They last well over 10 seconds.
When you listen to that There's no doubt that that is somebody that is totally fearing for their life. Quite soon after the screams, that figure is seen leaving the back of the house and returning in the direction he came from.
The neighbours are alerted by the screams coming from Jennifer and Stephen's house.
They heard this screaming coming from next door. It was like nothing they'd ever heard before. It was terrible.
It's November, the windows are shut, the doors are shut in houses, and they hear these screams over the TV. And that led one of the neighbours to text within their WhatsApp group one of the other neighbours saying, "Did you hear that scream?"
Texted Jennifer and he said, "Are you okay?" No response.
And that led them both, because the scream was so significant, to say, "Let's go and check everything's okay."
The door was unlocked and they went inside. And they went down the hall and into the living room, and that was where they saw Jennifer and Stephen lying in a pool of blood on the living room floor.
I was stabbed.
Right, when's that?
Neighbour's husband and the mother.
Whereabouts have you been stabbed?
No, not me, the neighbours.
The neighbour's been stabbed by who?
By me.
By you?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Colin Reeves sounded very, not calm exactly, but very collected, considering what he'd just done.
How bad are the injuries?
They've both been stabbed.
Right,
times.
several times. All right, stay on the line for me, okay? Are you in your house on your own?
No, my wife, my children in bed.
All right, okay.
It feels like Reeves is doing his best to be cooperative. He's answering all the questions.
Tell me exactly what's happened. Take a deep breath.
You can even hear him, it sounds like he's sobbing, it sounds like he's crying.
I went round
Yeah.
with a knife.
Okay.
The more of it you listen to, you hear him starting to breathe more heavily. There's longer gaps between what he's saying.
I've stabbed both of them.
All right, how many times?
I don't know, a couple of times each. 2 or 3 times each, maybe.
I think as he's speaking to the call handler, it's slowly, the gravity of what he's done is starting to dawn on him.
Are they still conscious and breathing?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
I think at that point he was shocked at himself.
Are they males or females?
One male, one female.
Okay.
But then you can nearly hear like the army veteran in him as well. Every time she asks him a question, he answers it succinctly, he answers it clearly.
What's your name?
Colin Reeves.
Alright, Colin. How are you spelling your surname?
R-E-E-V-E-S.
Alright.
But then you hear the man behind it who's struggling to come to terms with what's just happened. He's starting to realise what he's just done.
What kind of knife did you use?
It was a dagger.
Okay.
A couple of things that hit me from that call is he appears quite lucid, seems to understand what he's done.
Alright, just stay on the line for me, okay? We're going to get some help out there as soon as we can. Alright. So you stabbed them both several times?
Yes.
Quite coherent. It explains quite plainly what's occurred, answers the questions that the call handler puts to him.
Where's the knife now?
It's in my house.
Okay. Alright. You've done the right thing by calling us, okay? So what was their situation when you left?
They were both, he was lying on the floor, she was lying on the sofa.
Right, okay. And were they awake? Were they...
No, I think they were sort of drifting.
I'm sure there's absolute turmoil going on in his head. He's probably thinking about the impact it's going to have on his wife and his own children. So a lot of very conflicting and very difficult thoughts all flooding in at once.
Even before the call has ended, police units from the whole area are scrambled.
When the police arrive at a crime scene, our first job is to preserve life and also assess what we're actually dealing with. They were met with absolutely horrendous circumstances. Two deceased people in the living room, 2 adults. Both had suffered a number of stab wounds to their torsos, and there was significant blood on the floor. And really, unfortunately, there's 2 young children asleep upstairs in their bedroom. Those children were removed from the premises quite quickly and taken to a safe place until we could establish who their next of kin was, essentially, so they could be with somebody that they knew and knew them.
Rumours of an incident on Dragon Rise spread quickly.
I have local alerts on my computer that ping up, and it said an incident was unfolding in Norton Fitzwarren. So I clicked on it. Then they dinged up a picture and it was Jennifer's door. All it said was a scene was unfolding. So I took to social media. The forefront of my mind was, is Jennifer okay? Has Jennifer been hurt?
Danny gets a message from a friend of Jennifer.
She said, I'm really sorry. She said, Jennifer's passed away. Without a shadow of a doubt, the second I heard Jennifer was dead, I knew it was Colin. There was no doubt in my mind that Colin had done it. She told us this was going to happen, and it did.
When the police officers went to arrest Colin Reeves from his house, it was pretty calm.
Put your hands up. Not me, mate, him. You? Go in the house.
His demeanour was one of somebody that was resigned to the fact he was going to be arrested.
Hold still. Listen, you're under arrest at the minute on the attempted murder of 2 people inside the address next door. Do you understand? Okay. Let's walk over here a minute, out the way.
To me, it seems that Reeves is just completely dazed. You know, he's just stunned, he's stupefied. So I think the enormity of the situation and the consequences of what he's done is flooding into his mind. But at the same time, he was pretty much cooperative with the police. He was following instructions. It didn't look like he was suffering from acute symptoms of mental illness at that time.
Let's walk over here.
Although he's committed what at that stage we believe is a really serious offence, we still need to worry about the safeguarding of Colin Reeves. Yeah, having committed this offence, what sort of effect is that going to have on him and his mental health at that stage?
Reeves is taken directly to a police custody suite.
How are you feeling in yourself, bro? How are you feeling in yourself now? Confused? Okay.
By having him in a custody suite, we're able to monitor him lifetime to make sure that he's not going to do himself any harm and he can't cause danger to anybody else.
Under questioning, it's as though the former soldier believes he's back in Afghanistan.
Probably a lot to take in right now. Because just doing my job.
Colin Reeves was very much how you would expect a soldier to be speaking to a senior officer, and addressed to the custody sergeant, sir. Made a number of comments that he thought was on operation.
Confused. Yeah.
To me, that seemed quite genuine at that stage. It comes across to me that is not simply acting, but not psychologist, psychiatrist.
What was that about? It could be that he was just literally in such a state of shock as he's trying to calculate what's happening in his life and his future. Or it could be a bit more calculated than that. It could be that he's trying to put down the foundations of a psychiatric defence in the imminent future.
I just woken up and checked my phone, see a message from my stepsister, and it said something like, you know, are you awake, can you talk? And it's like urgent, and I thought, that's a bit strange. She called me and said, Jennifer and Stephen have been murdered. I thought, this is a prank, what's going on? What's happened? I've just woken up, my brain's not quite with it enough. And she said, yeah, they've been murdered. I was like, the boys, where are the boys? Are they okay? Are they alive? She said, yep, they're fine. I just screamed into my pillow because my son was still asleep. I thought, I can't wake him.
On Monday morning, police forensic teams enter the chapel's home.
I've got Colin Reeves in custody initially for 24 hours, which I can then get extended up to 96 hours. But I need to recover that evidence quickly. I need to be in a position to be able to charge Colin Reeves within that time period.
Neil Mead hurries to piece together how and why the killings occurred.
It was quite a small house, just kitchen and a living room downstairs, with a door onto the back garden, and both Stephen and Jennifer were in that room, and there was very little sign of disturbance elsewhere within the premises. This is something that happened very, very quickly. It wasn't a situation where Stephen or Jennifer were able to react.
For the first 3 days after Jennifer and Stephen were murdered, the children didn't know. We took their eldest to the park, and he said, "Have Mummy and Daddy done a bad thing? Are they with the police?" And all we thought was, we wish that's what it was. We talked to Stephen's sister, and she said, "We'll do it together. We'll tell them together." They both came and sat on my lap, cuddling up to me. I told them, "Do you remember how Mummy talked about Grandad, who is no longer with us? You know, he's up in heaven." And I said, "Well, Mummy and Daddy have joined him. They're okay. They're watching over you." At that point, their oldest made the worst noise, like the proper horrible cry. And I will never forget. It was one of the hardest days of my life. It really was.
Throughout the interview process, Colin Reeves answered no comment to every question.
Despite having admitted the killings in his 999 call, he is now less willing to talk.
Tell me what happened yesterday in Dragon Rise that led to the deaths of Jennifer and Stephen Chaplin.
He sat forward in his chair. It's a typical position that somebody would sit in being interviewed for such a serious offence, when the gravity of what's happened is starting to come to the forefront of their mind, and that the impact that's going to have on him for the rest of his life alongside the victims.
When you were being assessed in the custody unit here, you said, "I shouldn't have done it, I've ruined their lives and mine." Can I just confirm, did you say that?
No comment.
And what did you mean by that?
No comment.
The next stage would be to get the forensic post-mortems of Stephen and Jennifer completed, which will give me a cause of death. In Stephen and Jennifer's case, they were both found to have died from 6 stab wounds. So that tells me that he's gone there intended to kill him, and has done it very quickly once he's inside the premises.
When we actually look at the attacks, they were ferocious and they were efficient, but somehow they don't feel frenzied. So I think what we can garner from that is that there was actually a calmness and a cold calculation in terms of Colin Reeves' state of mind at the time.
All right. What kind of knife did you use?
It was a dagger.
Okay.
And the stab wounds have the telltale diamond pattern of a very particular type of blade.
The dagger we believe was used in the murder is what's called a Fairburn Sykes dagger, and it's the traditional dagger of the Commando Regiment.
Detectives believe they can see it in Reeves' hand as he enters the chapel's home.
When Colin Reeves left the army, he was given a presentation frame which had a dagger as the centrepiece.
It was something that army veterans got. It was a kind of a prestige thing, and we know now that he took the dagger out of the frame.
Reeves makes an active choice to use the ceremonial dagger. It probably would have been quicker and easier for him to just walk into his kitchen and grab a knife rather than smash the frame where it was. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it's somehow symbolic to Reeves.
Another bit of evidence we gained was a recording device, an Alexa-type device within the Reeves house.
And specialist investigators are able to find something in the memory of that device that finally suggests a motive for these brutal killings.
We were able to recover from that a small clip which supported the theory we had that there'd been an argument, a disagreement between Colin Reeves and his wife immediately prior to the offence.
He came home from the Christmas lights switch on, and he went upstairs where his wife Kaylee was watching TV, and he said, "I've been feeling lonely," and she says, "Well, so have I."
Reeves tries to talk to his wife about his struggles with his mental health.
She said, "There's only so many years I can take this," and it was at that point that she suggested that they should separate for 2 weeks as a sort of trial. Colin left the bedroom and then sat down on the stairs. He said that he cried and he felt a fear of losing everything, of losing his family, his kids, his wife. At that point he would have been quite close to the military plaque on the wall, which had the dagger in it.
Colin probably hit rock bottom because it means that he has to reassess his life, his future, maybe even his own personality traits. The potential breakup with his wife, I think, is a huge trigger point.
Investigators formally charge Colin Reeves with the murders of Jennifer and Stephen Chappell. But Reeves decides to contest the case.
I was very, very angry to hear that he'd pleaded not guilty. I was like, he has to be guilty, you know, he's admitted to it.
It was my first trial in my first job as a journalist, so I wasn't really sure what to expect. I think the fact that Reeves was an ex-soldier and that this had been a neighbourly dispute that had got out of hand had really drawn in a lot of journalists. The public gallery was absolutely packed.
As the trial of Colin Reeves begins, the veteran of the war in Afghanistan stuns the courtroom by pleading not guilty to the murders of Stephen and Jennifer Chappell on the grounds of diminished responsibility.
Diminished responsibility is a psychiatric defence. It's only relevant for murder and it downgrades it to manslaughter. The defendant and his defence team, on the strength of psychiatric expert evidence, has to prove that at the time of the killing they were suffering from an abnormal state of mind that affected either his ability to understand his conduct or to form a rational judgment or to exhibit self-control.
It just didn't add up. We were like, why is he doing diminished responsibility? Surely he knew what he was doing because he's the one that's called the police. He knows he's killed 2 people. So it just didn't make sense at all.
We understand that he has mental health struggles and we're not without, you know, I don't want to use the word sympathy, but understanding that people struggle with their mental health. But that does not mean that you get away with what you did to our friends.
Reeves' defence claims the combination of the Christmas lights he visited and the proximity of the war memorial triggered an episode of post-traumatic stress disorder.
When somebody's experiencing a genuine severe post-traumatic stress disorder flashback, they're transported back in time to the traumatic event like war. So everything around them, whether it's the visual sights, whether it's sounds, whether it's the feeling of panic, feels absolutely real.
In court we heard from his wife about when he was in Afghanistan.
She describes how he changed upon his return from the war zone.
He came home in 2009 and there'd been some sort of a skirmish or a scuffle with somebody else while he was in the army, and that meant that he was sent home without having the chance to decompress, which most military people do. You know, after they've been to somewhere like Afghanistan, they go on a kind of a holiday and they decompress and try and put it all behind them. But Colin Reeves didn't get the chance to do that because he was sent straight home. I think it was a very sad trial, and there were bits of it that were very difficult to cover. Certainly the audio of the moment the Chappells were murdered was incredibly difficult to hear.
The sound of Jennifer's dying screams shocks everyone present.
Family members left the court for those moments, but we heard it, and I don't think I'll ever forget what I heard in that courtroom when Mr. and Mrs. Chappell's last moments were played out.
I think I allowed myself to listen to it for closure. It didn't sound like Jennifer, but obviously you knew it was. And it was horrifying.
Reeves may have refused to comment under interrogation, but the 999 call he made is a key piece of evidence, played to the jury by the prosecution.
tell me exactly what's happened.
I went round
Yeah.
with a knife.
Okay.
I've stabbed both of them.
All right. What kind of knife did you use?
It was a dagger.
So you stabbed them both several times?
Yes.
The jury's reaction to listen to that call was disbelief, and it really focuses them about what we're dealing with here. You know, you've got two people that are dead, and a man phoning the police to say, this is what I've done.
I felt very angry listening to his voice from the call, thinking that he's just taken two wonderful people off this planet. He's orphaned two children. I was confused. If you've just gone and done that, why would you call the police?
The court is once again packed as Colin Reeves takes the stand. He reads from a pre-prepared statement.
He described feeling ashamed and disgusted by what he had done. He said he couldn't believe that he had taken the chapels away from their children and left their children with no parents. And he just seemed completely remorseful for what he'd done and really confused by his behaviour.
I was crying at it, not because it was sad, because I was so angry. I was like, how can he stand up on the stand and read that out? I don't think there's anything he could say to have made me feel better at all.
After hearing nearly 2 weeks of evidence, the jury retires to consider its verdict.
We were sat there and it felt like time was just going so slowly.
The jury takes just over 5 hours to reach their conclusion.
Reeves' proposal and that of his defence team that he had post-traumatic stress disorder was rejected. If he was suffering from a flashback at the time of the Christmas light celebration, he would have acted out aggressively, potentially at that moment in time. It doesn't make sense to me that he would have had that experience, then managed to drive all the way home and still be agitated and still be in the midst of a flashback. And it also wouldn't explain why he attacked his neighbours.
We all sat with Jennifer at the grave and listened to the sentencing on the phone. We felt it was something that we wanted to be with Jen. We couldn't take her with us, so we went and sat with her.
The judge sentences Reeves to 38 years in prison, telling him, "You stabbed your victims in their own home and left their children as orphans."
And it was a huge sigh of relief.
And all of us just in unison, tears streaming down our faces because we couldn't react.
I was satisfied that justice had been obtained for Jennifer and Stephen and their children and their family.
I'm fascinated by Colin Reeves' actual mental state at the time of the killings. He strikes me as somebody who's actually a very paranoid individual, possibly related to the trauma that he's seen. There were marital difficulties and he potentially was on the verge of splitting up with his wife. So I think maybe he harboured some anger and resentment potentially towards her, but because he loves her, he instead is displacing it onto the neighbours.
Not long after the trial ends, Rhonda, Jennifer's sister, has a baby daughter.
She's named after my sister because I wanted a name to carry on. I didn't want it to get stuck. She deserved to carry on, even if it means I'm going to be raising a little version of my big sister.
My first ever school was over in the distance there. That's where I met Jennifer. But this whole town tells the story of Jennifer, and one of her favourite views is of the Tor. This is my favourite photograph that I have of Jennifer. It's Jennifer and Stephen on their wedding day. They are really, really good memories. Really good memories. It's not a sadness when I look at them. It's sad that I can't make more.
Are you with him now?
Well, I might just go and stab him again, but...
Alright, do not stab him again.
Why?
Are you with the patient now?
Well, I'm in the lounge and he's in the kitchen bleeding to death with any luck.
Alright, madam.
I don't...
How many times have you stabbed him?
3 times.
3 times, okay.
Once I thought I'd get his heart. Well, he hasn't got one. And then twice in the abdomen.
Police have been called by 66-year-old retired accountant Penelope Jackson.
Hello, madam. Do you want to just step outside for me a minute? Can you come outside?
Yes.
Thank you.
He's on the kitchen floor.
Okay.
Can someone just stay with Devon while I go in?
Police arrive, Penny's led outside, and police switch on their body-worn cameras that they all have. So they're recording their interactions with Penny.
Right, get the ambulance in, pronto. We need CPR.
No, please don't.
Yeah, we need the ambulance in.
Stabbed him a bit more.
We've got CPR being done at the moment.
It's a very unusual thing to see a woman admitting to a crime, especially when that is a crime of enormous violence.
The victim is David, her husband of over 20 years.
Under arrest for suspicion of step murder. You do not have to say anything. It may harm your defence. You do not mention when questioned anything you're later relying for, and you do say may be given in evidence.
I don't think Penelope Jackson really thought through what she was going to say. The words just tumbled out. She couldn't filter herself. She couldn't stop herself.
Yes, I stabbed him. Once, because he's a... He's an aggressive bully and nasty, and I've had enough. And when he said, you wouldn't do it, I did it twice more.
Penny fell in love with David. I think they probably both like to drink. They're both fun-loving, both like having a good time. She was good-looking. Obviously, there was an attraction there.
Penelope Jackson met Lieutenant Colonel David Jackson when they both worked at Army Training Regiment Grantham, a military base in Lincolnshire.
I think they were a good match in as much as they did both love entertaining. Penny was gregarious, yeah, she was an extrovert, and David was a bit more quiet.
She liked to entertain. She was like life and soul. She was interesting, she was knowledgeable. She got a personality that you listen to. But other than that, I didn't know much about her own life. They must have fell in love.
But this affair is not a simple midlife romance.
Penelope is in a very difficult situation. She's living in this very transient world that is the military. It's also a very masculine world, and so she's probably feeling quite isolated, quite ostracised. And at this time she finds out she's pregnant. And so that's got to create a really difficult situation, because Penelope and David, they were actually also both married to other people at the time.
They were just so shocked and disappointed with David in a way, but I love my brother, and especially as Penny was having a baby. Obviously David, doing the right thing, stood by Penny and married.
It was a turbulent time for the family. They're both adults, so they knew exactly what they were doing. You have to accept it, these things happen, and that's what we accepted it for what it was.
And their little girl was born, Isabel. We loved her, she's such a pretty baby. Beautiful child. They were happy, and we thought, that's it now. They married in the March. It was a happy wedding. They were really happy together. We had lots of parties with them and get-togethers, and she was very entertaining, actually. They're both in the army. They obviously still travelled. They lived in Malta for a while, and also Germany.
Penny used to like shopping. She used to go to the gym quite regularly. Their relationship did come across as being quite traditional, where Penny would be cooking his meals for him, and he was quite particular about having things done in a certain way at a certain time.
David was regarded by many as being a proud man, perhaps a bit of that stiff upper lip.
David would like somebody that could cook a full meal for everybody. Penny was more than happy doing that, and she was a very good cook, actually.
One would have thought, with Penelope and David being mature, Penelope being in her 40s and David being in his 50s, they were going to wander off into old age, enjoying each other's company, loving one another, having finally found the right partner.
We had devastating news about Gavin. It was all a terrible time for all of us, the way it happened.
Gavin was the 29-year-old son of David and his first wife.
Gavin was married. He'd been in the army for 12 months, which David was very proud of. His wife got pregnant. But the year the baby was born, Gavin ended his life.
We didn't know at the time. Gavin had some sort of relationship with somebody else. And he must have just had this flash of, I don't know, this mental blockage, and it was such a sad time for everybody. Obviously David hit David harder than anybody, I think, because I think some way he held himself responsible for what had happened.
Gavin left a suicide note that dealt a devastating blow to his dad.
The note that he made spoke about him not wanting to end up like his father, so making reference to his father having an affair with Penelope Jackson.
It affected David so badly. I think his nerves went. He had to have psychological treatment for quite a while. He was really devastated.
We saw, obviously, David at the funeral, but we didn't see much of him after that. Not for some time.
The once outgoing couple retreat behind closed doors, and their relationship takes a dark turn.
He was consumed by grief that can impact on their state of mind at the time, and Penny would say that was affecting his mood and his temper, and he became much more short with her and was much more prone to outbursts of anger and violence. Following the death of his son, Penny said that it had quite an impact on David. He suffered from depression and was also violent.
There was an incident where David had supported Isabel to buy a mug full of chocolates to give to Penelope Jackson on Mother's Day, and that he had picked that up and smashed it against the wall prior to her being able to give that to her mother.
They have another argument, and it results in David threatening her with a knife, holding a knife to her throat.
And there was an incident where she said that he had strangled her and held her against the wall.
Obviously, these incidents were very shocking. They would have been very shocking for Penny to have suffered, and it must have been very difficult for her to deal with. He subsequently went for counselling.
In an attempt to put the past behind them, David retires from the army, and the couple buy a dream property in the French countryside.
There's a beautiful farmhouse, about 3 acres of land, and like on the top of a slope, right out in the middle of the sticks. And I think there's a little village, there's about 5 houses in the village and a church.
Eventually, David would ask us to go over, and sometimes he'd even pay our fare. I had a wonderful life. Lots of friends, lots of entertaining, and eventually David seemed happy, and you wouldn't guess there was anything wrong. David said one day, "You know, Jen, we might split up."
David reveals that the idyllic life the couple have in France wasn't as picture perfect as it seems, as Penny wants to return home.
It wasn't enough for her mind. She'd do gardening and cooking, but she wanted to excel with her career as an accountant. I said, "I don't want to move back to England," but Penny does.
Despite David's reluctance, the couple sell up and buy a bungalow in Somerset, a far cry from their majestic French farmhouse.
Barrow is a small coastal village, so it runs alongside the beach. It's a very small community, not much going on in Barrow.
To the outside world, everything came across as normal. There was not really any outward signs of any difficulties, but there were warning signs that things were maybe not quite right between them.
On one family visit, David confides some shocking news to his sister.
One time we went over, David took me to one side and said, "Did you know that Isabel is not my daughter?" And I said, "That is quite a shock to me." But he said, "I've adopted her now. But at the time, I presumed that child, that baby was mine. And that was the reason I married Penny, to give the baby a name and to do the right thing." I wouldn't have guessed for a million years. You know, by looking at the child and David, I thought there was a likeness, but there isn't. There isn't really. And I said, "How do you feel?" He said, "Jen, I am more than angry."
"7 years back in the UK and COVID strikes. As families around the world are forced together, 77-year-old David is suffering with bowel cancer.
Penny would say that that was affecting his mood and his temper. She would be cooking his meals and looking after him as he got older. He required extra support. So I imagine things must have been quite difficult for her.
I think that Penny, in some ways, David wasn't getting any younger, and I don't think he could cope, and that's what she was worried about. Being the sort of person she was, she liked a lot of people around her. But when Penny had to look after him full time, I think it was the same.
They were in a very intense situation. It was COVID, they couldn't leave, and this is when we start to see an escalation.
David started it by arguing with Penny about the television, about the remote control and her inability to find the right programme that he wanted to watch. People will have arguments over the most minor things, which 99% of the time will just get brushed off. But, you know, obviously something escalated.
She followed him round the house with a camera, filming him losing his temper. And when he walked into the conservatory, she locked the door.
David's locked in a ring, unable to get out. You know, he was an old man, he was 77 at that point, and probably feeling really frustrated, upset.
He is very angry. He's lashing out, trying to break out of the conservatory. She's then recording him. Now, you could say that she's locked him in there and she's recording it as evidence because she's scared of David getting out and harming her. Or you could say that she was trying to provoke him.
By filming somebody who is in distress, somebody that you're supposed to love and care about, filming them, it shows that complete lack of empathy, that lack of ability to recognise someone else's distress.
This is now a violent, very volatile marriage. it's dangerous. It suggests that Penelope is scared of David, but simultaneously that she is confident in standing up to him.
In an effort to set himself free, he picks up a poker and starts smashing his way out of the conservatory. So it's pretty dramatic. It's escalated a lot in a short space of time, and not surprisingly, the police turn up. Escalation in domestic violence can be a very, very dangerous and worrying thing. Tragically, we've seen far too many cases where the police have attended to minor argument, but so often these cases escalate.
During lockdown, we communicated with Penny and David over FaceTime.
To try and lift the couple's darkening mood, Jenny and Brian regularly check in.
Penny was saying, just so fed up of this, so fed up. And she was. But she was stuck in, wasn't she, really? David said to me, I'll ring you Sunday. And that would be like the 14th of February. That's what his last words, I'll ring you on Sunday, Jen, as normal. And obviously it didn't happen, did it?
It's Penelope's 66th birthday. Penelope's daughter and her husband are going to join them on a Zoom thing. So it's kind of like dinner party by Zoom.
Isabel had bought a gourmet meal for her mother and David to share, and there had been an altercation, some tension.
Penny had produced some bub and squig as an addition to the meal that her daughter had provided for them. And David felt embarrassed by this, that she thought that that meal that their daughter had provided for them wasn't enough. And bickering started. David walked away to diffuse it. They quickly changed the subject and carried on with the meal. And then suddenly the iPad went dead, battery was flat, and they couldn't find the charging cable. So that was the end of the meal, really, and the end of the family get-together, because they couldn't charge the iPad up.
Penelope messages her daughter and she says, if it all goes tits up, I love you to the ends of the earth.
Isabel calls Penny to check everything is okay. Penny says, I'm absolutely fine, don't worry, I'll call you in the morning. But just 40 minutes later, things were far from okay. David Jackson dials 999 from the kitchen. The first part of the call is too distressing to broadcast.
David is heard on the phone speaking to the 999 operator.
He tells the operator that his wife has stabbed him in the chest.
And it's during this call that Penelope stabs him 2 more times.
David can be heard screaming out for help.
David's head must have been filled with fear and terror. His life slowly ebbed away. It must have been horrendous for him. Perhaps he even knew that he was dying.
And are you with him now?
Well, I might just go and stab him again, but...
Alright, do not stab him again.
Why?
Okay, so just listen to my voice. Okay?
Yes.
Stay on the line with me.
I am competent.
Okay.
Penny was very matter-of-fact, very calm, very softly spoken. She tells the call handler that she's mentally fine. She didn't come across as being manic or hyper.
Are you with the patient now?
Well, I'm in the lounge and he's in the kitchen bleeding to death with any luck.
Penelope does not sound to me like someone in shock. She's revelling in what she's done. She's pleased with what she's done.
You're not paid enough to do with this. It's not fair.
Okay, well, ultimately, madam, I'm listening to your voice, and you're the help I have available, so we need to help him, okay?
No, I'm not.
This is a person that she's been with for 28 years. She's going against what she's being advised to do, to help him, to potentially save his life. She is the only person at the scene that can help.
All right, madam, how many times have you stabbed him?
I did the one.
You did the one?
And then he said I wouldn't do it again, so I did it twice more.
It's possibly a trauma response. Everyone reacts to trauma very differently. Whether she intended to do it or not, you're still going to be shocked by what you're seeing in front of you. And lots of people can try and cope with that trauma in lots of different ways, but including trying to make the situation more light-hearted, even if it might seem impossible. She is just responding in the moment. It feels very off the cuff and very raw.
So in total, how many times?
3 times.
3 times, okay.
I thought I'd get his heart. Well, he hasn't got one. And then twice in the abdomen.
That suggests that she knows exactly that what she's done is heinous and awful. It also, I think, suggests that Penelope fundamentally believes that she has done the right thing.
When officers received that initial call to go to this house and they heard what was happening, their primary thoughts were, save this man's life.
Hey, madam, do you need to step outside for me a minute? Can you come outside?
Yes.
Thank you.
And of course, it was an unusual scenario because as they arrive, out of the house comes this woman who is confessing to what she's done.
I admit it all.
All right.
Just get them. All right, I want to go in. All right.
No, he's on the kitchen floor.
Can someone just stay with Devon while I go in?
Penelope Jackson is immediately arrested.
At this moment in time, okay, if you just listen to my colleague.
Under arrest for suspicion of attempt murder, mate. Under arrest for suspicion of attempt murder. You do not have to say anything. It may harm your defence. You do not mention when questioned anything you're later relying for, and you do say may be given in evidence.
Yeah.
Could I get my coat?
Just bear with me 2 seconds.
In there.
You alright?
With any luck, he'll be too late.
Penny's very matter of fact. She seems more concerned about having a coat on than the welfare of her husband.
Can I get my coat?
Right, get the ambulance in. Pronto, we need CPR.
No, please don't.
Yeah, we need the ambulance in.
Stabbed him a bit more.
We've got CPR being done at the moment.
On one hand, you're kind of feeling a bit scared of Penelope because this is someone who's just stabbed another human being multiple times and is mostly concerned about their coat. On the other hand, you are wondering, is this someone who was lashed out for a reason?
I stabbed him once because he's a...
No, I'm going to send them all.
He's an aggressive bully, a nasty, and I've had enough. And when he said you wouldn't do it, I did it twice more.
Penelope specifically says that David was an aggressive, nasty bully. So I think it suggests to me that there was a lot of significant toxic issues in this relationship. She's trying to claim that's the reason that she's attacked him.
Coats in.
What colour's your
go
coat?
in the front.
Yeah.
Grey wardrobe.
Okay, it might be a while, alright, but I'll try and get... There's obviously a lot going on, okay?
Oh, with any luck, it'll be too late.
Penelope, my advice is don't talk about it now, okay?
No, I have no intention of not agreeing to what I've done.
Okay.
I know what I've done.
Alright.
And I know why I've done it. And if I haven't done it properly, I'm really annoyed.
Despite the paramedics' best efforts, David Jackson is pronounced dead from his stab wounds.
All right, Penny. I'm further arresting you for murder.
Good.
I've already cautioned you, so your necessities for your arrest is for a prompt and effective investigation and to stop further harm.
Sorry, that one's a bit tight.
So,
This
Penny,
one's...
Is this a woman who really doesn't care? Is this a woman who is in complete shock at what she's done? There's circumstances where not everything is black and white as it appears.
I think I might slip those.
all right.
I'm not
Do you want her out?
exactly.
Yeah. Right. Just step out, mind your head.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm very sorry for being a nuisance.
You've got to take a temperature, okay?
Yeah. Oh, that'd be just really great. Get COVID on the top of this.
The Jacksons' bungalow is declared a crime scene.
Then the investigation really kicks in. The homicide detectives have to start investigating the background, of course, of David the victim, of Penelope who's arrested, and gather all that evidence. Crime scenes very often give up their secrets, with the entire house forensically examined. A filleting knife with an 8-inch blade was recovered on the kitchen floor that clearly was the murder weapon.
And on the kitchen worktop, police recover a handwritten note from Penelope.
The handwriting looks quite neat for somebody who's just killed their husband. There's no blood or marks on there. There's punctuation. It looks fairly legible.
At the top of the page says self-defence, confession, underlined. To whom it may concern.
I have taken so much abuse over the years. Look at my records in Hereford, Germany.
But he was a good daddy, exclamation mark. However, the mask slipped tonight, was unforgivable.
I accept my punishment. May he rot in hell.
Is she thinking about potential defences? She's talking about self-defence. She's talking about lessening her culpability for David's death.
What's important, though, is trying to work out when this letter was written, because that can have very different inferences. So if Penelope wrote the letter after she's already stabbed David, that could potentially mean that she's accepted that she is caught and she is writing out her side of the story. Or it could be that this happens before stabbing David. That highlights that there was significant intent for his murder.
Was she thinking about things ahead of stabbing him and planning to attack him?
If you were just writing the note explaining what had happened, almost certainly traumatised by what's happened, why would you be thinking about whether this equalled self-defence as a potential mitigating factor of the murder?
Penelope's note adds a whole new perspective onto David's death. She's immediately taken into interview.
It is, of course, the right of any arrested person to say nothing during interview. And Penny did exactly that.
So I put my book down, switched my light off, and the phone goes at 11:45 at night. Izzy's on the phone, and she said, Dad's dead, and Mum's been arrested, and she's in custody. Well, I just collapsed. I just thought, no. Well, I couldn't speak again. You don't expect something like that, do you, really? Not in your life, you know. And it's just gone. It's just horrible. We talked about it, Brian and I, and cried. And I just said, I just hope he didn't die, hopefully. But he did. He suffered.
Penelope's note confesses that she stabbed her husband because of his violent behaviour towards her. These are claims the police must now investigate.
The police interviewed their daughter, and Isabel says that there has been some violence towards Penelope 24 years earlier, not long after David's son committed suicide.
Isabel described that he was a broken man. David was hugely impacted by that loss, and he went on to have counselling as a result of that. And I think what's also important to note is that actually these incidents of violence were in isolation.
Isabel tells police that she did not witness any further abuse from David towards Penelope after he attended counselling.
Whilst violence and aggression is not acceptable within a relationship, we can almost see why David might be behaving in that way. I think what we see here is situational couple violence, where there is a trigger, where there is a reason. We didn't see that carry on through the rest of their relationship. What we very much saw is a period of actually Penelope Jackson forgiving David for those few incidents, and then them moving on to a happy life.
David's sister recalls visits to the Barrow bungalow when Penelope wasn't the gracious host she liked to present as.
She got a side on her that could be nasty. She could be. We've seen it. Yeah, we've seen it.
And they did appear to have a very happy relationship to the outside world, but there is unhealthy behaviours in their relationship. There was always this undercurrent.
She'd start goading David, and David would say, "OK, Penny, that's enough, no more. Just stop it." She'd say funny things in that tone, and truthfully, that's really horrible. And we found that embarrassing and hurtful for David. It was just horrible, horrible situation.
She would belittle him or humiliate him in front of other people and make him feel bad about himself. It had to be her way or not at all. So there was that element of control, pattern of behaviours going on there behind the scene that David was subjected to.
You could see the mood changing in Penny. Listen to me. I'm talking, you listen to me, what I've got to say. You couldn't talk, you couldn't speak, you've got to listen to her. And that's how it was all the time. We found that overpowering. David really didn't want a confrontation in front of us, obviously. But at the end of the day, I was worried, because it wasn't a good situation. Maybe David didn't want to say anything to me at the time, that things were getting out of hand with Penny.
There's some striking reality there when it comes to David, that masculinity, old school, that men don't want to be perceived as weak or vulnerable in any way, so much less likely to speak out, to tell people that they're feeling scared or they're not happy with the way that they're being spoken to or treated, humiliated or belittled. That's not something that would have necessarily come easily to David, so he wouldn't have been telling anybody at that. He may not have even recognised that as domestic abuse.
With all evidence gathered, police approached the CPS.
The police have gathered body-worn video evidence, evidence from the scene, the note that Penny had written, so they had more than enough evidence with which to charge her with David's murder.
People don't usually question a female victim why she might have been killed. But in the period leading up to the trial, there was lots of question as to who David was, how he had behaved, whether he posed any risk to her, as justification as to why she may have ended up killing him on that day. But what's also important to note is that anybody who is afraid of their partner, or who actually just recognises that if they don't behave in a certain way, if they're being prevented from going about their everyday life for fear of consequence, they are the victim of domestic abuse, just like David.
8 months after the death of David Jackson, the trial begins at Bristol Crown Court.
I looked across at her and she smiled at me. As if to say, "Hi Jen, you know, we're friends," or I couldn't believe that. And I just glared back at her as if to say, "I just hate you for doing this to my brother."
Penelope Jackson pleads not guilty for murder, but guilty of manslaughter.
She was trying to get away for manslaughter, and we truly believe that she was obviously guilty, full stop.
Penelope admits that she killed her husband, but what is on trial is whether she had an intention to kill him.
In law, it's what's called a partial defence, loss of control. There has to be what they call a trigger, but it can be over a long term. So, for example, in the course of a marriage, it might be if there is a history of violence over many, many, many years.
Under cross-examination, Penelope and David's daughter Isabel tells the jury about the violence she saw between her parents in the late 90s.
What's also important to note is that actually these incidents of violence from David towards Penelope Jackson were in isolation, and around 20 years ago, very, very shortly after the loss of his son Gavin by suicide. A defence described a history of abuse towards her, but the police couldn't find any evidence to support that. We didn't see ongoing abusive incidents from David towards Penelope. What we very much saw is a fairly normal relationship for the 20 years from then to the day of his death.
It really highlights to me a potential flaw in Penelope's story, in that I have no doubt that there was violence in this relationship, but what this highlights to me is that she's exaggerating that for her own benefit.
There's a cruel side there. She tried to prove that David was a bully. David would never ever do that. He wouldn't. I wanted to shout to her, "You are telling such lies, but you have to be so quiet." And I just hated her. Hated her.
Whilst the jury hear no evidence of the ongoing abusive relationship which Penelope claims in her note, they do get an insight into her side of the story.
Penelope Jackson took the stand and said that the situation had spiralled out of control. On the night of the murder, there had been an altercation, and Penelope left the dining room and went up to the spare room with a knife. She told the jury that she intended to kill herself.
She took a knife to bed with her and she put it under her pillow, and she was thinking about things.
She was sat there stewing and getting angrier and angrier.
So she decided she'd confront David in his bedroom about that night and how awful he'd been, about his behaviour, and how embarrassed she felt.
She told David that she intended to use this knife, to take her own life, and then she said that she'd questioned that, and actually she decided that it was going to be him that lost his life that night.
Penelope tells the courtroom it was at this moment David said she wouldn't stab him. So she did.
I was absolutely gobsmacked to think, how could she do that? I couldn't believe it, really. I just couldn't believe it.
Well, I couldn't believe it was Penny saying the words. We didn't know anything about that. I don't know. I never can believe it.
With devastating injuries, David made his way downstairs to call 999.
15 minutes or so. Part of that is so horrific, so graphic, that it has never been released. It was, however, played in court, and David's loved ones had to sit there and listen to it.
Whilst he was on the phone to the police, we hear Penelope in the background. We then hear David scream out in pain.
And that is the point where Penelope stabs David another 2 times.
And then we hear Penelope take over the call.
Okay, are you with the patient now?
Well, I'm in the lounge and he's in the kitchen bleeding to death with any luck.
I was sat in court when the prosecution played it. To be honest, when I heard the call, I didn't see it as anything but being callous and cold and uncaring. It's one of the worst things I've heard in court, and it's a very hard thing to hear. I mean, to be absolutely honest with you, you sort of decompartmentalise it, because if you didn't, I think you wouldn't be able to cope with it, really.
It's a tough listen, and I'm sure the jury paid very close attention to every single second of it.
Although the call is a traumatic listen for the jury, it also holds the prosecution's key to the case.
They needed to prove that Penny intended to kill David, and that call was a critical part of it. The prosecution said that she hadn't lost control because, having inflicted the first stab wound upstairs, she had then subsequently, a few minutes later, stabbed him again, repeatedly while he was on the phone. And what she'd done was deliberate. So she hadn't lost control twice. She wanted him to die. Therefore, she was guilty of murder.
The trial concludes, and the jury retire.
The jury had a decision to make. Was there an intent? Was there a loss of control? Had Penny been the victim of prolonged domestic abuse at the hands of her husband over many years?
After 11 hours, they return.
The call came through that she's been found guilty. And I just cried. I'm so glad she's got what she deserves, and she has. But I also thought at the time, what a terrible waste. And I admired her in some ways, of her knowledge. And to think she's thrown all that away, for what?
The judge sentenced Penelope Jackson to life in prison with a minimum term of 18 years.
In the judge's sentencing remarks, he made it clear that he believed it was premeditated, that she'd intended to kill him. Ultimately, he rejected Penny's claims. He commented on the fact that David's family would always have to live with having to hear what Penny said about him in her trial, and how she sought to tarnish his name.
So I think she was very much relying on that kind of gendered assumption that she was a victim and he was a perpetrator, that domestic abuse doesn't happen to men. When you think of the ONS statistics, that actually 1 in every 3 victims of domestic abuse is male, that's certainly not reflected in society's belief systems. Anybody can be a victim of domestic abuse, but also can be a perpetrator of domestic abuse.
So sudden, or just gone. You know, can't even say goodbye or no. It's really hard.